Hey, this is D at Witch Doctor Zero, witchdoctorzero.com. The fine folks at Jant's Knife Making sent me a box of leathers, exotic skins, some wildebeest here, some ostrich shins or ostrich legs, purple, tan, and the turquoise here. I'm going to use this on a knife that I won from 310 Knife Company. I'll show it to you later. I'll point at the logo. Here it is. 310 Knife Company was having a giveaway. It's a really, really nice knife. I believe he calls it his Scout. Anyway, I wanted a forward setting sheath, and I made a pattern up, and I'm going to do an inlay, so I cut out the inlay. I'm just going to find the part of the leather. I like to use pieces of leather with blemishes on it. I really like the way they take the color. So find your areas and trace your patterns, and we can move on to cutting those out. I got this really nice knife from Pain Leather and Tool. You can find them on Instagram also. You want to make sure you don't push too hard when you're using a round knife. It'll dig in. It's usually the sharpest knife in the house, and if you push too hard, it won't glide along. You're not real accurate if you push too hard either. You can always go back and make a secondary cut. You can see here I'll roll the knife a little bit if it's not cooperating. But when you cut out for the inlay, don't push too hard. Always sharpen your knives before you start. Just take that extra couple minutes to give them a couple passes on the stone. Where I just pointed here, you don't want to cut all the way down to a point. You want to stop short. You want to cut away from a point, not into the point. I'll do it again here, see? And that way you don't get an overcut. You don't get things cut that you don't want cut. Again, don't push too hard. You can always go back and go back from the back side, see where you need to go through a little more. Now I'm just going to take a number 3 bronze edger. Go ahead and break the corners of this so I can burnish it really nice. When you get to those tight corners, you see there, I take it up and kind of spin it and then pull the pieces off. I'm not going to bother to break the back side here. We're just going to glue it up. I am going to go ahead and round off and even up the edges. Get them pretty much the shape that I want them to be. I'm going to go ahead and give everything a coat of yellow. I like to use yellow as an undertone for a lot of my work. Same when I'm airbrushing or doing a painting for that matter, I love to start with a base of yellow. Just seems to brighten everything at the end. I use the Pro dyes as much as I can. They seem to penetrate a little better and last a little better. Make sure you dye all the sides of your of your leather. You want to make sure that you get the back sides and the edges and that you have a good even coat. With the finish we're going to do, it doesn't really matter how even this coat is, but I like to stay consistent. Again, we're going to get the back side, and I don't think I have it on the video here, but after I put the yellow dye on, I put gum trag on and use a glass slicker to really smooth that backside down. Now I'm going to take a little bit of mahogany, get the excess off of the dauber so it's not dripping. Put a little bit on my gloves and smear that around, and I'm just going to go around, and it's almost like dry brushing a model or something. I'm going to go around and I'm going to let it glob on where it wants to, because we have some bug bites and some blemishes on this leather, and I really want those to darken a little more than everything else. And the only way for something to look truly imperfect is to make it imperfect. You want something to look like it's aged over the years. You can't put a perfect, pristine finish on. Now I'm going to take the yellow and I'm going to go back over everything with the yellow. And it's just going to blend it all together really nice and give it a little more alcohol saturation to carry the dyes down in a little deeper. Now I'm going to take the piece that I cut out of the inside for the inlay, and I'm going to take about 1/8 of an inch off of all sides and round the tip. I do this so that the thickness of the leather we're using for the inlay will be able to fit through the hole. And now I'm going to go ahead and check and make sure it fits the way I want it to with the gap. And then we're going to edge the inside of the cutout for the inlay and darken the edges around the belt loop, because we're going to have to go ahead and slick that down and fold it over and finish it off, and we won't be able to get to it later. I like to use a used dauber when I'm doing edges, because they are a little bit stiffer and they don't have the flyaway hairs. They give you a more accurate edge. But now I'm going to go around and mess that up. I'm going to get just a little bit of dye off the dauber and go around and, yeah, mess up my nice edge I just put on. Again, There's only one way to get imperfection. There's only one way to make artificial patina. Actually, there's not only one way to do it, but you have to do it, is the point. Smearing it down with the yellow again. I'm using a 2000 grit wet or dry sandpaper. It won't mess up the finish of the leather, but it really just does the final blend and almost deposits a little bit of extra pigment into the imperfections. I'm going to go ahead and wet the edges with plain water and slick them down and slick the inside here. I like to burnish with plain water before I put a final edge dye on, and then afterwards I usually burnish with a beeswax and oil blend. And right now I'm just burnishing the belt loop part that's going to be sewn down, and I'm burnishing the inside, and I'm using the buttonholer point here to really get the corners real nice. And now I'm gonna make the welt. Just trace the outside of your sheath pattern, and then make it about, I don't know, 3/8 of an inch wide and a little bit long on the ends so you can trim them down where you want them. Just kind of freehand that down and keep it pretty consistent. You can use tools if you need to. Cut that out. Make sure it lines up all right. Then select the piece that you would like for your inlay. I love to use white Stabilo pencils. They write on anything and come off really easy. Make your pattern for your inlay about 1/4 to 3/8 wider than you actually need it to be, so you have room for the pull when you force the bottom piece of leather up through. And go ahead and center it up here and make the tracing of where I'm going to push the inlay up. Make sure everything fits in all right. Use some barge cement or whatever kind of contact cement you use. Make sure you go over the line a little bit, and also you're going to want to get the edges of your inlay piece. Something else I didn't show you, I don't think. I used a splitter and I split the leather down a little thinner for the inlay. You don't have to do this. I just didn't want the inlay to stick out further than the top of the sheath. I didn't videotape the drying time on the cement, but you'll go around and pull your edges up and try to stick them to the side. At least get that bond and that stretch started. I'm going to use a heavy roller here. Stick everything down really good. Also get the edges nice and tight. Since the ostrich leg is pretty bony on these scales, the extra weight and roller help a lot. And push your leather down so you're getting a really nice tight fit on there. I was going to go ahead and make a white line on the inside, but I didn't need to. After I pressed that down, I could see exactly where the edge was breaking. You don't want to use too much glue. Try to be neat enough that you avoid getting glue down inside your edges. You can see I got a little there. I'm going to wipe that off. Really press that down. Again, I didn't let you see the glue dry. I'm going to use a nice cobbler's hammer and pound this thing really good. Get that glue well seated. And you can see the extra piece I've cut here. I'm using an 8-ounce leather for most of the sheath, but this extra piece I've got cut here is a piece of 4 to 5 ounce leather. And that's what I actually split the inlay piece down to. And then we're also going to use a piece here on the back side. And we're gonna cement that on so that we have the whole thing enclosed. After we get that all cemented together, I'm going to pull some freehand lines here with a stitching groover. I've got about 3 or 4 stitching groovers, and they all have a specific purpose. This one's great for doing freehand drawing, and I have some that look more like dividers and some that look more like a pulling rake type design. There's all different kinds of tools. Just like with the razor blade, you don't want to go all the way down to the tip. You come into the point. This time we're coming into the point and out of the point. It Just a technique you're going to have to work on. See there, we're coming into the point, and now we're going to come out of the point. I'm going to go ahead and use small round, I think it's a 3.5 or 4 millimeter spacing prick punch. I like the small round ones when I'm doing work like this or on a watch band or something where I just don't want big needle holes. After getting this guy punched, I'm going to give it over to Sydney K, and she's going to hand sew that inlay and that back together. She pulls the thread to one side of the hole when she pushes the other one through. You can't really get both needles through the same hole when you're using the small round prick punch. Also, you'll notice that the holes look a little bigger. We use a round awl to chase those holes before we start sewing. There it is with the cork on it. It's so sharp. It's crazy. We keep that cork on it. We're always messing around with all these sharp knives and things. You'll see right here where she accidentally pushed the needle through the braided thread. So what she's going to do is just go back through the hole and back through the thread and correct that. When you come to the end, back where you began actually, you're going to want to run 2 or 3 loops of thread around and then burn them off. We use a little thread zapper. The holes get kind of tight, so you got to use some pliers there. And then this thread zapper burns these needles off really nice, or the threads off really nice, and you don't even have to flame them. quick little zap. Burns it right off. And then back over to the table, to the glue table. And we're going to coat pretty thick on the back side of this welt. We'll coat that pretty thick. And that's going to make it easier to get it right where we want it on the back of the front of the sheath. We'll just kind of pick that up and set it down where we want it. And because we used a thick coat of glue, it's going to leave a nice piece of glue right where we want it. Then we let that air dry. Stick that together. And now I'm just kind of fitting where I want the back to be, where I want it to be sewn down. And we're going to have to do that before we glue the whole thing together. Just a lot of stuff we do freehand. We don't bother with specific patterns, especially when we're doing a one-off piece. Now I'm going to put a little bit of rubber cement where we're going to stick that together and sew it. Again, like the welt, put it on heavy, flip it where you want it, let it dry, and you can stick it down. While that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and darken my edge up here. I've already sanded it and broken it. Cut off the welt even. I like to go ahead and get the dye down on the inside so you don't look in the sheath and it looks like it's unfinished. And back over to the burnishing wheel. I'm going to use some wax on this, give it a really nice finished top edge. While I'm doing all that, Sydney K is going to go ahead and sew the belt loop. And now I will glue the whole thing together and hammer it with the shoe hammer. Really give it a good whack. You want everything to stick nice and tight. You can hammer down those back stitches. Now we're going to even the entire edge up. And any spots that may need filled in, I'm painting the edge black on this with an edge paint as opposed to an edge dye and a burnish. So we're going to leave a rough edge, but because I'm putting the paint on, any dips or imperfections I'm going to fill in with leather powder off of the sanding wheel there next to the burnisher, and then we'll drip a little bit of super glue in that. And I use the Star Bond Ultra Thin, and it will just set up and fill in any little gaps or anything that you may have. Next I'm going to break these edges here, and we're going to break the back down a little bit and start painting these edges. Actually, we're going to sew it first. I'm going to paint over the back stitches. It's a kind of a rubberized paint, the edge coat is. And when you paint over those back stitches, they'll be sealed forever. And instead of hand sewing through this big thick thing, I'm going to use the Tipman. Just take it nice and slow. And then a final burnish with this nice snakewood burnishing tool. Get any bits of rubber cement or contact cement out of there. Get any clamp marks smoothed down. Put a final bevel on. Got the knife in there to keep it stiff while that's going on. And this knife will fit in either way, whether you want a traditional draw or an ice pick draw. I designed a sheath to work either way. With the ice pick draw, the finger hole will be headed the opposite way.